This is the third annual CSAD Global Readathon, honoring narratives from Africa and the African diaspora. This year's theme, Roots, the Journey of Us.
My grandmother and her siblings were all cotton pickers. They hated that life. They picked up everything they knew and left to the north.
My grandmother migrated to Philadelphia from Eastman, Georgia.
My mother's family migrated to Los Angeles in 1924.
My grandfather, he jumped on a moving train and headed to Kentucky.
I think migration is freedom to Black America.
That decision to migrate was everything. It broadened Black life and what that life could look like. To create a whole new life in these new places is what made the next generation possible.
The African-American Great Migration was, in fact, one of the most significant demographic transformations in United States history.
The music that we associate with America. The food ways we associate with America.
Doc, I got something for you.
Oh man, it looks like it's out of a magazine.
The North always had this connotation of the Promised Land. It took on new meaning with the migration.
I have seen this photograph 1,000 times. In every book or essay about the Great Migration, you see this photograph.
There was a very tragic story as to why they moved.
If there's a Black American dream, I think it's to have the freedom to dream. Freedom to imagine oneself and a future for oneself that involves both African Americans and immigrants.
Why is it important for people to understand that Black people came through here too?
It's like affirmation saying, this is our dream too. You don't see that. You don't hear about it.
We are still fighting for visibility around Black immigrants in the U.S.
When did you become aware of the phenomenon of the reverse Great Migration?
You could feel it. If you lived in Atlanta, you saw our population growing year over year, decade over decade, and you realized something was happening.
Movement is a really concrete way of measuring your freedom. Realizing that I can make a choice to pick up and start up all over again elsewhere. If that's not the most transformative decision that you can make, I don't know what is.
So you just saw the trailer for Great Migrations, a People on the Move series. I have watched this. This historical show fits perfectly with our theme, Roots, the Journey of Us. It shows how movement itself plays a major role in the Black experience. Now, according to PBS, the show, led by filmmaker Professor Henry Louis Gates, it explores this transformative impact of Black migration on American culture as well as society. And it also examines the growing number of immigrants from Africa and the Caribbean. So the series currently streaming on gpb.org. You want to watch this. It is really fascinating. I learned so much from this. And I know, of course, that you are familiar with the other show that he does. This is an Emmy-nominated series, Finding Your Roots. I was fortunate to participate, to take part in the series. It was an eye-opening experience.
First of all, you thought with the name Malveaux, your parents, everyone thought you were French, but instead you discovered it was sub-Saharan Africa.
We're going to show you a real clip, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
All righty.
Suzanne's father was convinced that the Malveaux name originated in France, meaning that somewhere back in his family tree, a white man of French descent had fathered a child with a woman of African descent. While this idea seemed plausible, we couldn't find a record to support it. So we turned to DNA and looked at Suzanne's father's Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is passed from father to son in an unbroken line, which means it could lead us back to the place where the male Malveaux originated.
Are you ready to see what we found?
I want this mystery solved.
All right.
Yes.
Please turn the page. So this test shows where your father's 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 people came from back thousands of years. What's it say?
Sub-Saharan African. That's amazing.
Your Y DNA goes to Africa. Does this surprise you?
Well, yes, because we always thought there was somebody from France.
Which was logical.
That was the story.
Which was logical. Your ancestor was fathered by a black man. And the proof of it is that that Y DNA goes straight back to Africa.
Wow. Yeah. That was a story that just kept going.
DNA had answered one question, only to raise another. If the Malveaux male line extended in an unbroken chain back to Africa, when did they start mixing with Europeans? Our search led us to the marriage record of Suzanne's third great-grandfather, a man named Jean-Baptiste Laurent Malveaux.
Can you read whom he married?
Charlotte Rochon.
Have you ever heard that name, Charlotte Rochon?
There's some family friends who are Rochons.
Yeah, well, they're related to you. Charlotte Rochon is your third great-grandmother.
Wow.
And let me show you what we learned about her.
Okay.
Would you please turn the page?
Sure.
Suzanne, here's the 1850 census from St. Martin Parish. This would have been recorded 5 years after Laurent and Charlotte got married.
Laurent Malveaux, age 46, color black.
Black.
Charlotte, age 38, color mulatto.
That's right. And what's that tell us?
She's mixed.
Ding. Charlotte Rochon had white ancestors.
Wow.
That's quite an experience. But to be honest, why would you not expect you to have white ancestors? Because your features are more white than African American or black.
Yes, and so they actually figured out exactly how much, right? It was 65% European, 34% African, 1% Native American, or Indian, which we did not know. But Monica, I can tell you, this experience on that show, it was traumatic. I mean, it was so emotional. It was a 6-hour taping that we did. 6 hours straight, maybe a little lunch break, right? And just these dramatic reveals that kept coming. So to your point, I suspected, and we knew, that we had European ancestry. So slave owners, that we had African ancestry also, right? So descendants from Africa. We had a line of freed people of color as well. I want to show you something.
Let me help you.
It's called the Book of Life. This is actually what is on the show, what was on the show, and what Skip was doing. And I earmarked a couple of these pages. It's hard, perhaps, for the audience to see, but what this actually reveals, and I want to read this to you.
Read it. I've got it.
Okay. It says, a Negro man named John, aged about 30 years, with his 2 children, to wit, William, a boy aged about 7 years, and Desiree, a girl aged about 3 years, sold to John Moore for $975. So it makes you cry, you know?
You're tearing up
900,
now.
Yeah. That's hard. Right?
It's very hard.
That's a hard thing to hear.
But there was something else that was hard for you to hear, and that was your what? Fourth great-grandfather who was black and owned slaves?
So these are complicated stories because there were also freed people of color who also owned slaves. And that kind of took my breath away because that too is a part of our history. But then I learned something more, which was that one of them, he purchased a person of color, a young woman, and then he freed her because he wanted to give her freedom, and that was part of his motivation. And they ended up having a relationship later and 2 children who were also freed. And so you can imagine, right, the complexity of all of this coming to light. It was really quite extraordinary. Another thing that we also discovered was that we have Native American, that we have from Canada, Quebec, in that area, that we actually traced back to a woman, Exipakinoa, and we had no idea that there was that Indian ancestry in our line. And another very unique thing about our family was that normally you have that connection, and you can see the root, right? The slave root and the mixing, and when those enslaved folks in Louisiana, because that's where they're from. That's New Orleans is my background. My father, on my father's side, there were 8 generations of freed people of color.
Which is unusual, unheard
very
of.
Unusual,
yes.
Right? Amazingly unusual. And so there's actually a chart that they provided, a genealogy chart, and it was really extraordinary to learn and to see. So we did trace back. I want to show you, if y'all give me time.
Sure, go right ahead.
I can show you. Okay,
oh,
so
there
this is it.
The
this
global.
Is it. So this is how he did it, right? So it traced back to this section: 65 European, 24% African, and then Native American, and then it broke it down amazingly. Okay,
got it.
This is the European. So out of the European, he broke it down to Western European. And then it was Italy and Greece, and then you can see how that was broken down, 14%, 37%. And then here was the African ancestry piece. And so Mali, 12%. Benin, which is why I was mentioning that to Jaimin, because he's from Benin, was 6%, Cameroon, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, North Africa, and Senegal. And so that was how it was broken down. But our people are from New Orleans, and that's where they thrived and where they prospered.
But I know the one thing we need to remind everyone, it was not just freed people who also owned slaves. But remember, many of us got here because the African tribes who were fighting each other would sometimes sell the other tribe into slavery, not knowing what they were going to, but they did do that. So, Suzanne, like you, I also have my story. I discovered where in Africa my ancestors were from. The revelation happened right here at the GPV studios when I was co-hosting the show A Seat at the Table. So let's take a look. I'm excited because I had this done once before, and all it told me is that my family was from the Bemalike people in Cameroon. So...
Oh, are you really?
Yes, and what we really want to know is which one of us has more white blood so we can really pick on them.
You know what?
Okay.
Always picking on the light skin folks.
Okay. This says, aha! Deneen is going to be upset. I'm about 78% sub-Saharan African, with about 72% of that coming from West Africa. I'm 19.6% European, mostly from Northwestern Europe. And I have some Native American DNA as well, which I knew. I'm excited because I had this done once before, and all it told me is that my family was from the Bemalike people in Cameroon. So...
Oh, are you really?
Yes, and what we really want to know is which one of us has more white blood so we can really pick on them.
You know what?
Okay.
Always picking on the light skin folks.
Okay. This says, aha! Deneen is going to be upset. I'm about 78% sub-Saharan African, with about 72% of that coming from West Africa. I'm 19.6% European, mostly from Northwestern Europe. And I have some Native American DNA as well, which I knew.
I love this. I mean, this is funny. This is actually...
It was very funny.
And, people don't know sometimes. You're like, do you have your black card? You don't like, do you belong, right? And what percentage, right?
But it was so funny because we just knew Christine was the one who had the larger percentage, and it ended up being me. But the other fascinating part was that for Deneen to find out that most of her heritage was from Africa.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and the reaction.
Because she was found literally in a basement, in a basket. So she never knew.
She didn't have any idea.
No.
And her response, her reaction.
Well, she said, I knew I was blackety black.
And it's like, what is the criteria for that exactly?
Yes.
I don't know. Well, it's so meaningful. It's fascinating. I wish everybody had an opportunity, a chance to do that. This was my father's passion, by the way. I mean, he did, you remember, obviously, when Roots came out, and everybody started looking into their backgrounds.
But some people were afraid to because they didn't want to know.
And isn't that something, right?
That's a whole other discussion for another day.
Right, the discoveries, the secrets, you know, all of the things that are revealed. It's brave. It's a brave endeavor, right, to do this kind of work, I think. Or to do this kind of work, right? To share our ancestry, our roots, right? Monica,
it's scary.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being so brave with me. I love doing the show with you. Appreciate you.